Growing frustration with Lebanon's economic crisis. Protesters are angry that 3 months of anti-government demonstrations seem to have gone nowhere. What's needed to break the stalemate? And are Lebanon's leaders willing to change the political system? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Rochelle Carey. For 3 months now, people in Lebanon have been demanding change. A worsening economic crisis means many can't find jobs, pay for basic goods, or even withdraw money from the bank. They're blaming political leaders for corruption and mismanagement. And after months of peaceful rallies, the protesters are calling for a week of rage. Police fired tear gas and water cannons to disperse crowds near the parliament in Beirut on Saturday. Nearly 400 people were injured. Protesters are repeating their demand for Lebanon's sectarian political system to end. They want a new government of independent experts who have no links with traditional parties.
I think that the message of everybody staying here is that the more police violence they face, the more revolutionary violence they will face in return.
We are in an economical crisis. Everybody's going to get hungry. Everybody's going to eat their leaders soon enough. I don't have to convince anybody about what's happening today. It's clear what's happening. Who can get a hold of their money in the banks?
We lost everything, job, family, everything. This is a country with 5,000 years of history. It is an amazing country. They took everything. We have nothing left. This is why our only option is to go down on the streets and ask if it's with violence, we have to use violence. We are fighting a 40-year corrupted government.
Take a look at how all this developed. Nationwide protests began in October against high living costs, poor public services, and government corruption. By the end of the month, Prime Minister Saad Hariri had resigned but stayed on in a caretaker role. Reforms were proposed and a new prime minister considered, but several nominees were forced to drop out. Then Prime Minister-designate Hassan Diab was accepted and tried to form a cabinet, but that failed as political factions began arguing. The latest violence was sparked by the formation of a new government being delayed and the economy further deteriorating. That's led to banks limiting the withdrawal of dollars and foreign transfers. Let's introduce our panel of guests in Beirut. Rania Masri, an elected council member of the political party Citizens in a State. By Skype, Jamil Muawad, a specialist on Lebanese and Middle East politics, and Elias Farhat, a retired military general. Welcome to all of you. So one of the protesters said, "We are in free fall now. What happened last night comes from people's real pain and anger." Rania, what do you make of that assessment?
It is exactly correct. I mean, what happened yesterday is an escalation of what's been happening for more than 90 days. And it's the direct responsibility of those in power or those who claim to be in power because they have shown complete incompetence, if not direct unwillingness to resolve the core crisis. The core crisis is that of an economic bankruptcy. And the economic bankruptcy is a consequence of their political bankruptcy and their decision not to resolve the problem. It's been 90 days. It's been more than 1 month since Hassan Diab was appointed prime minister. And what has been resolved? What economic plans have been presented? Absolutely nothing. We've been getting the ring around while people's incomes continue to fall and this country spirals even further into economic bankruptcy. What the protesters have been saying for more than 90 days is they don't trust this leadership. We don't trust this leadership. We are calling for a peaceful transition of authority, a peaceful negotiated transition of power so we can finally become building a civil state in this country, building what needs to be built and stepping away from this very divisive, corrupt, broken sectarian political leadership that has caused this economic bankruptcy and the economic bankruptcy that has caused the violence that we are seeing in the streets.
Jamil, what do you see as what was the tipping point that really made this escalate in the last 24 to 48 hours? What do you think the tipping point has been?
Yes, thanks for having me. I think that there is a decision by the ruling class to oppress the protesters. So this is clear in the way, the riot police were behaving. For 2 nights, They were directly repressing, the protesters, and they were very brutal in an unprecedented way in the recent, in Lebanon's recent years. So I believe there is a decision by politicians to end people's mobilizations on the street. Yep.
So you think that it was the police and the government side that escalated this, and it's a deliberate tactic that they're using to deal with the protesters? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, of course, people are fed up. They've been, as Rania said, on the street for 90 days now, and the ruling class has turned the deaf ear and the blind eye to the demands of the protesters. Until now, they haven't done anything in order to respond to the demands, but not only to the demands of the protesters, but in order to find solutions for the potential economic and financial collapse. So yes, there is a decision, but this decision is also a reaction to the fact that protesters are very resolute, and they're going to continue their fight and struggle in order to find a smooth transition into a new government and into a new political order.
Elias, what are your thoughts on why this has escalated so much in the last 24 to 48 hours? Human Rights Watch specifically says that, in their point of view, from what they're hearing, the security force response has been brutal, and that this is a culture of impunity that for police abuse. What's your take on why things are disintegrating so quickly?
Both were brutal. The demonstrators were brutal. They burned a bank. They attacked the security forces. They injured 167 of them. 3 are seriously injured. This is the first time that the police forces undergo just this crucial situation. The demonstrators brought with them masks and brought with them many stones and throw stones on the police forces, and this was aired on the TV directly. So both were brutal, and it's the mistake of both sides. But the question is, why now? Why yesterday? That's because for forming the new government, when Mr. Hassan Diab was designated to form the new government, they made a sit-in in front of his house for 3 days, and then they left without any resistance from any security force. And now he is about to form the government. We saw that there is an escalation in the demonstrations, and the protesters are using new styles and violent steps in their opposition in their demonstrations. So I think that those who are behind the demonstrators, given that most of them came from Tripoli by buses to Beirut, they have something in the government, in the new government. They have some opposition about some people. They have something that it's still now unknown.
Okay.
There is something unknown in all this story. There is something unknown. Who sent them in this time, and who ordered this violence?
Okay, hold on. When you say unknown, are you saying that it's not clear to you what the protesters want? Because they seem to have been pretty clear.
No, I don't think that they are clear. Why yesterday? Why not before? Why they are using this force? Why they are burning the bank, Mediterranean bank? Why they are
Elias,
the pillars and throwing stones on the security forces?
Hold on, Elias, hold on.
Yes.
Rania wants. I can tell Rania wants to answer that question.
If I could respond, yes.
Yes.
There's 2 very critical issues here. One is, of course, the banks would be a natural place for protesters to express their justified anger, because the banks have been collaborating with the so-called ruling class, with the political authorities, in stealing the public money and stealing the deposits and creating this financial crisis. They have been part and parcel of the problem. But more critically, here's the question. Does the ruling class and those in authority, do they view the demonstrations as the problem, which is a problem that they seek to solve? Or do they view the economic collapse, the financial bankruptcy as the problem? because they are behaving as if people in the streets are the cause of the problem, rather than people in the streets being the consequence of the problem. The problem in this country is the collapse of our economy, and our economy has collapsed specifically because of the political, financial, and economic decisions taken by this political leadership. Therefore, when people protest in the streets from Tripoli all the way to the south, from Beirut all the way to our mountains, what we are protesting is very clear. We no longer trust this sectarian political leadership. We are demanding the building of a civil, secular state, one that will provide our economic and social needs, one that will represent us all equally and not look at us as sects and as communal communities within one nation. The protesters are being very clear. Unfortunately, the politicians, quote unquote, seem to regard the protesters as the problem rather than their leadership as the problem and the bankruptcy as the problem.
Okay, let me put that to Jamil. So she's saying that the protesters, at least by the people in power, are viewed as the problem as opposed to what really set them off in the first place. Is that because these are the people whose livelihood, whose way of life they feel is being threatened because it's worked for them, Jamil?
Yes, of course. I mean, it's about time to admit that the revolution is nowadays a main political actor in the country. And this is something that the ruling class doesn't really want to recognize. So in a way, we always try to find some reasons to deny them agency. And we say it's either they come from Tripoli or they don't have leaders to represent the revolution. What do they want? I mean, it's clear what do they want. Although they might not have clear plans for the transitions, but they do have a clear discourse. And the discourse is we're fed up with this ruling class and we want a new government, independent government, and we want to find solutions for the dire economic situations. It's about time to admit that the revolution is a main political actor, and we should recognize that the ruling class should no longer be in denial. They're in denial. I mean, Hassan Diab for now has been, 1 month into, his designated prime minister. Until now, he did not address the public opinion. Till now, we don't know what are the general guidelines of his potential rescue plan. Till now, he's still busy negotiating with this politician and that politician and, adopting the same old mechanisms in forming a government, which is the muhassasa or, taking shares in the pie. So It's not true that the government was about to be formed. It's not true. I mean, two main political actors in this ruling class, Rislan and Frangi, they were against forming the government and they were delaying it. So it's not the protesters who were delaying the formation of the government, it's the ruling class itself.
Let me ask Elias about that. Elias, what do you say to that it's not the protesters that are dragging their feet, it's the people that they're protesting about, the ruling class that are dragging their feet on getting something done? And Saad Hariri also tweeted in the past couple of days, he said there is a roadmap to calm the popular storm, stop wasting time, form a government, open the door to political and economic solutions.
Yes, actually, the ruling class or the government are not sovereign in terms of economy. You know that the banking system in Lebanon, they have $170 billion deposits, most of them from outside Lebanon, because the banking system is a paradise of interest. They pay more than 10% interest for US dollars, for example. They are under the complete authority of the Federal Reserve in the United States. And when the Secretary of Treasury take a measure of making transfer money to Lebanon between difficult and impossible, that means all the banking system will collapse. And they start collapsing 2 years ago after the tight measures of the Secretary of Treasury who visited Lebanon.
Okay, so
his deputy visited Lebanon several times. And this economy is fragile. It's not built on a basis.
Elias, I understand what you're saying, that there perhaps are outside forces that may be contributing to this, and we'll get to that in a moment. But first and foremost, people in Beirut, the ruling class in Lebanon, the question again is, could they not have been moving the ball forward in the past 3 months?
Yes, the formation of the government needs to an accord between the several parties represented in the parliament in order to the government to take confidence of the parliament and to start to work. So the Prime Minister designate Mr. Diab is consulting several parts in order to form a government. Really, I think he is stick to form a government of specialists and people who are not politicians or not, they are, I mean, do not attend here or there in the political trends. He is working on this, but you know, we have to admit that his task is very difficult, and he needs some people to support him, not to obstruct them.
Okay, Rania,
we must give him a chance.
Okay, Elias, hold on just a moment. Rania, let me...
If I may.
Go ahead.
If I may, I agree with much of what Mr. Elias has said, much of what he said. He confessed and acknowledged, basically, that this ruling class has known of the crisis for at least 3 years, and they have done nothing to deal with it. He acknowledged that this ruling class is, quote, not sovereign, and I agree with him. They are not sovereign because they are held hostage to their sectarian representations within the country rather than representing all of Lebanese and all of Lebanon equally. I agree with him. This ruling class cannot lead the country forward. It is not an issue of whether we develop a government of technocrats or a government of specialists. This ruling class has their technocrats. They have their experts. We don't have a problem of lack of knowledge. We have a problem of lack of political courage and lack of political responsibility. We need politicians in this country who can take our country forward. They need to have the courage and the expertise and the leadership, and they need to represent all of Lebanon. Therefore, they cannot be beholden to these sectarian political parties.
Okay, hold on.
We have a roadmap forward. We have done that before,
Rania,
which is building a government with exceptional legislative powers.
All right, Rania.
That is what we are calling for.
Just a moment. Jamil, I want to bring this back to actually something that Rania and Elias have both talked about is the banking system. Let's remind our viewers, literally on any given day right now, how difficult, how frustrating, how demoralizing it is for someone trying to get their money and they can't. What is this experience like?
Yes, it's very tough. It's very new. For a long time, the Lebanese, somehow they trusted their banking sector, and the ruling class was promoting, the ruling ideology was promoting the banking sector in Lebanon as, very positive, very strong. It ended up being exactly the opposite. So people are being, they're struggling in their everyday encounter with the banks. They've been humiliated. Some we see, some people are crying. Others, they're complaining because they cannot get and access their deposits. And this is very, frustrating. So going back to the question that the general asked, why now? Why? Because now they no longer can support the situation and they want things to change. So we should not blame the protesters for being, violent. We should see why the banks are being extremely violent against Lebanese people and those who have deposits in these banks.
As a specialist, Jamil, in Lebanese and Middle East politics, did you expect this? Did you expect these protests to last this long? Could you tell that it was different this time?
No, of course, these protests are there to stay. By the day, we're proving that the Lebanese, as I said, young people are more resolute, and there is a general public opinion supporting these protesters. Before, we have a discourse of diabolization and saying these protesters, some of them are infiltrators or not. What we realized today and yesterday is there is a public opinion not necessarily encouraging these rioters, but saying people are fed up. So yes, there are some people who are taking direct actions towards the banks, towards the power that is oppressing them, which is the ATM machine, which is the bank itself. But also there is a general public opinion in the country that is saying enough is enough. People, they cannot support, these, the practices they're succumbing to. And so in a way or another, I believe the protests are going to last and they're going to continue until, we form a new independent government.
So, Elias, if these protests do continue and perhaps even get worse, where is the political will to actually address what the protesters want?
Let me go back to the unknown. As long as the protesters do not have a clear leadership that can show themselves and dialogue with
Elias,
people. And,
Elias,
yeah,
a real,
we
Elias,
can't predict anything.
yeah, it's a real leader would really dig in and go address the protesters to figure this out. The critique cannot always be that the protesters are not organized. They seem pretty clear that they at least want to be able to go to the ATM machine and get more than $200.
Yes, but I mean, there should be a leadership. 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 people that represent those protesters and the dialogue with the others and
so you're
demonstrate what they want exactly.
Are you saying
so as long as this is not unknown,
are you saying that politicians, people that know how to move in political circles, are you saying that they don't know how to reach out to their own constituents to see what it is they want?
Yes. If you live in Lebanon, you see that sometimes they say that the revolution is backed by the Lebanese forces. Sometimes they say that it is Hezbollah. Sometimes they say that it's Mr. Hariri. Sometimes they say, and each time it will be correct on the ground. What is going on the ground will be correct. But they should have a leadership, a clear leadership, in order to demonstrate in front of all the people what they want exactly and to take their decisions. Okay. Now, we have heard that they want to continue tonight what they started yesterday.
Go ahead, Elias.
I mean, yes, we heard that they are mobilizing now in order to come to downtown Beirut and to resume what they started yesterday. So who told them that? Who are behind them? We don't know. Where is the leadership? Still, we don't know. The people support them to fighting corruption, fighting this ruling class, fighting the confessional system in Lebanon. But who are they?
Okay.
How the decisions are being taken?
Okay, Rania. I think often when there are protests, we do hear that critique often from the people in positions of power that, they'll say, well, we don't know what's going on. It's not organized. What do you say to that?
I say it's quite a cheap shot by the political authority. I mean, let's be serious. The cries from the public have been very clear. They've been very clear for more than 90 days. These are decentralized protests happening throughout the country, organized by the protesters themselves, not organized by any particular political party or any particular organization, organized by people on the ground, and their cries have been unified. We do not trust this political leadership. As to if they want leaders, if this current political ruling class wants to see leadership arise, the leadership is the vision itself, and the vision is clear. We want a different economic structure. We want a different political system. And the pathway to that political and economic system is quite clear. It cannot be done by the same political parties that created the problem. That is simply impossible. It can be done by politicians in this country, and our country is small enough that we know each other. We know who has the leadership, who has the expertise, who has the knowledge, who has the moral courage to take the very difficult decision and carry this cursed legacy of bankruptcy forward so that we can protect all our society with no exceptions. We are not standing here, particularly here we as citizens in a state, مواطنون ومواطنات في دولة, we are not standing here to obliterate any member of our community. We are not standing here to deny any member of our community. We are standing here to take full responsibility for every single individual in this country, which is more than I can say for each sectarian political party that is holding on to their broken chairs and wasting what is very valuable in this country, which is time. We do not have time to waste. We no longer have the dollars in this country to allow us time to waste.
All right.
I plead with those in authority to do what they need to do to have a negotiated political transition, a peaceful negotiated political transition out of their power, and to have those of us with the moral and political leadership to be in charge to lead this country forward so that we can build a civil state.
Okay, and that will have to be the final word. Thank you all for this discussion. As we said, these protests have been going on 3 months. We'll continue to follow them, and I suspect we'll be having this conversation again soon. So thank you all for joining us. I appreciate it. Rania Masri, Jamil Muawad, and Elias Farhad. And thank you for watching. You can see the program again anytime. Go to our website, aljazeera.com, for further discussion. You can also go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Rochelle Carey, and the entire team here. Bye for now.